Nervous. We're
Hi,
live.
guys.
We're live. Here we are again.
Here we are. We
All
missed
right.
you. We just recorded an episode without you, and Jay made fun. I'm just throwing you under. Jay made fun of you. That's all I'm saying.
Well, listen.
I defended
that's,
you.
That's why I have a team of lawyers.
Really?
You'll be hearing from them. I mean, on two counts. Number one, making fun of me, and number two, doing it without me.
Yeah.
They're cutting me out. Next thing I know, the royalty checks will be coming in, and
That's what we're trying. We're going for that.
I will just say, Rabbi, who do you really think was making fun of you on the episode? Do you really think it was
you? I think
you,
it was
you
all
think
you.
I was the one egging you?
Yes,
egging
I think it was you, Jay. Yes, between you and Chalei would never do that.
I would never
slander.
I would
Slanderous.
never.
Never.
I would never. I'm
Slanderous.
so respectful. I'm only respectful all the time of my father.
Thank God I have
which is-
another daughter.
Oh my God.
That's all I could say.
Oh my God. I'm always respectful of you. There's never a moment that I'm not respectful of you.
I'm trying to get into the Facebook to see
What's
if
it saying?
it's saying check your notifications.
Oh,
No, I think we're.
Because I think we're probably gonna. I think we have the same issue as before, where it's on like a
Hold
private thing.
Is it private?
Can you fix it or no?
I have to get into the Facebook account.
Oh, shoot. Hold on.
1 second. Let's see.
Is it an email? I'm texting it to you. Does it give you like a link, or I have to like log in?
1 second.
Oops,
Is it on mine? Is it me?
It
Yeah, it's
says
you.
Is it mine?
we sent notification to your Galaxy A51.
Oh, it's your Galaxy. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a Galaxy. I'm a human who has an iPhone. Who has a Galaxy? Only my father, the one customer.
Yes, literally no one else
What does it say here?
on Earth.
No,
No
it
one.
says public. It says for me public.
Is it going?
It says on mine. It says on mine public.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, I'm glad everyone's watching this if they are, but I don't know if they are.
There's nobody on right now.
Okay,
So I know
good.
it's just
It does take a minute.
okay.
It does take a minute. Let me just go to me.
Do you have Facebook on your phone? I will be shocked if you do.
I have Facebook on my phone. What do you mean?
Wow.
I don't think
I
we're
am
on.
shocked. Okay,
We're on. We're on.
Okay, perfect.
We're on.
Like magic.
We are back for another episode of edJEWcation, where we are trying to unpack some of the deeper ideas of the Torah and talk about daily mitzvahs that we're doing and ideas in Jewish history and people. So today we are going to dive into a pretty heavy topic, a serious topic, as serious as we can be, actually, but it is a serious topic, and I think we'll treat it with the dignity that it deserves. And there's been quite a few people who've asked us along the way this past 13, 14 months since October 7th. People have been very interested to hear about this topic. I was lucky enough several months ago to learn really like an in-depth study on the Torah's perspective on redeeming captives and what to do about hostages. I have a friend who she's actually the executive director of Hillel Israel, Rabbi Noga, and she gave us an amazing class on it. So I thought we could take some of the sources that I got from there and have a conversation about what does the Torah say on the issue of redeeming captives, hostages, however we want to refer to them, prisoners that were taken unwillingly, right? Not people who, this isn't about jail, people in jail. This is about captives, correct, Ta? I just want to make sure that I'm
right.
Okay.
These are not jail prisoners. No.
Right. These are not criminals who did anything. These are innocent people who were taken captive by an enemy. And the Torah obviously has a lot to say about it. And we are dealing with it in contemporary times. And so we thought it would be interesting to unpack what the Torah says.
Yeah, I think this is a good question. Something I think probably a lot of people have been thinking about for a while, and certainly I have been. And especially when you think about the situation in Israel and you think about the hostage families,
Right.
and how you've got these two different coalitions of hostage families. One on the side, I think the organization is called Tikva, I think it is, that's more on like the side of, no, we've got to smash them to get the hostages back. And then another coalition that's saying, well, no, Jewish law or biblical law is, you do anything you can to get your hostages back. But the challenge I've always had with that perspective is if you took it to its most extreme points, and they said, we'll give you your hostages back, you just have to give up the entire country of Israel.
Right.
That's obviously, that's outside of the bounds of what's acceptable. So you're not going to give anything to get the hostages back.
Right.
So I think it is an interesting question about what is reasonable to offer to get hostages back.
Well, and I just, before my father jumps in with maybe some analysis on this, I just want to say one thing, that this has really, I think, been a terrible, I hate to use the word division, because it's not, all the Jews around the world, and especially in Israel, are feeling a deep pain, no matter what side of this equation you're on, right? But there has been a conflict between the idea of redeeming the hostages versus winning the war. And I don't know who set up that binary, if that was done, because that's the reality, or if that was done for political reasons, but it has felt since October 7th that there was a conflicting job to do, right? On the one hand, get all the hostages back no matter what. On the other hand, finish this war, smash Hamas. So I don't know. It's, and I feel like every time I talk about it with people, everybody just ends up super emotional and uncomfortable. And, we think about the parents of the hostages and the spouses of the hostages, and you can't even imagine telling them, even for a second, that we're not doing everything we can to redeem our hostages. So I want to just name that. That's a very, very painful, difficult conversation, obviously.
Correct. Okay. So with that said, we wanted to do this from a Torah perspective.
Right.
Which means we have to lay down some parameters.
Okay.
Number one, you would mention the word passionate, and it's a difficult conversation. So the first thing you have to do is become completely dispassionate. When you're talking about a Torah perspective and a legal perspective, you have to take away all of the personal biases that are going to go into this. Because we know that if you talk to the hostage family, they would say, we don't care. We just want our kids back. We want our children back. We want our parents back. We want our husband back. She's not interested. They're not interested in hearing, different perspectives. They just care about their loved ones, and that's the way it should be. But when you're dealing with a Torah perspective, you have to take on any personal biases in this, both on the side that says, well, listen, we just have to win this war and we're sorry, and both that, listen, we'd like to do everything we can to get them out, and we're going to make any deal possible, to get them out. This is an academic. This is an exercise in academia.
Right.
We're not going to come to some kind of a solution where, I feel comfortable calling the Hashem's families and say, you know what, we just did a broadcast on Facebook and we think we've solved the problem.
Right.
So why don't we just have a conference call between us and Bibi? And then, and
we'll
that's
figure it
it's
out.
over.
Yeah.
We just said, the people in America that have this podcast called edJEWcation have come up with solution. They've come up with a solution, and here it is. So forget that.
I feel very called out by this whole thing. I feel like you're calling me out.
Why?
Who knew?
Why? I'm just saying that what we're going to do here is going to be just maybe a little bit of history about where we are and what the laws are concerning, releasing of captives, redeeming captives, and then we'll talk a little bit about how it plays into today's present situation. Now we're going to start with a bold statement. Maimonides, which is the primary codifier of Jewish law, we've talked about it many, many, many times, writes that there is no greater mitzvah than redeeming captives. Okay? That is a very bold statement, because that includes also Shabbos, Yom Kippur, all the holidays, believing in it. This is, he makes it clear there is no greater mitzvah than redeeming the captives. So let's keep that in mind. So So this is a tremendous priority within Judaism, is that God forbid someone becomes a captive, we're going to go out there to try to do whatever we can to redeem them. Why do we do that? So we have historical precedent, starting from the first Jew that we've talked about a lot, and we've talked about in our Torah study, was Abraham. Abraham had, a nephew, a brother-in-law called Lot. Lot lived in Sodom, near Sodom. The Sodomites fought a war with the kings. We talked, I think, a little bit about that in our Torah study. And one of the people that was captured in the middle of the war was Lot. So the Torah tells us that, they came and they took Lot and all of his possessions, and someone came and told Abraham about it and said that they had heard that Lot was captured. So what did Abraham do? He immediately went into action. Why? Because Lot, his brother, his brother, meaning not his biological brother, but his family member, was taken captive. And says when Abraham heard that his brother was taken captive, he immediately led forth the trained men in his house, 318, and pursued Lot's captives as far as Dan. And then he redeemed them, and he put Lot back into his home, and he brought back all of the property, and brought back his brother Lot, and the property, and the women, and all of the people. So right away there we see that as soon as Abraham heard that Lot was in trouble, what did he do? He immediately jumped into action. So that gives us what we call precedent in the Torah about as far as redeeming captives. Then we take it we'll ratchet up one level higher. There was a prophet, his name was Jeremiah, and Jeremiah's prophecies were generally gloom and doom, not exclusively, but a lot of it was gloom and doom. He lived around the destruction of the first temple. You can read the book of Jeremiah yourself, but generally he was a prophet that came to talk to Jews about what's going to be the punishment for deserting God and turning your back to idols and foreign gods. And it says, and God says to him, and I'm going to read it. It's taken from, I think, chapter, number 15. He says, and it shall come to pass, this is when God gets angry, and he tells Jeremiah, listen, this is what I want you to tell the people, that I'm not going to save them, but I want them to go. And it shall come to pass when you say to them, to where shall we go? Jeremiah, God tells to Jeremiah, tell the people are going to go. So Jeremiah says, where should I tell them to go? Then you shall say to them, so says the Lord, such as are for death to death, those that are you destined for death are death, those that you are destined to the sword, and those are destined to famine, and those that are destined to captivity. So there's 4 places here. One is death, one is the sword, one is famine, and one is captivity. Now the Talmud stops and says, Rabbi Yochanan says, whichever is later in the verse is more severe than the one before. And since captivity is the last one, it is the worst of all of them. Meaning that becoming a captive is worse than suffering famine, dying by the sword, or death, whichever way death comes. Why? Because it includes everything. It includes famine, it includes sword, and it includes death. Meaning that when you're a captive in a hostile environment, you don't know one day from the next. One day they can starve you. We've seen that. One day they can kill you. One day they can, throw you out, whatever it is. So Rabbi Yochanan clearly says, as bad as all of those other 3 elements were, death, sword, and famine, captivity is worse than all. So here we see how terrible and how tragic being a captive is, and the necessity of the community to do all it can to redeem them and to release them from this captivity. So Maimonides continues to say that the redemption of captives receives priority over sustaining the poor and providing them with clothing. Indeed, as I mentioned before, there's no greater mitzvah than the redemption of captives. For a captive is among those who is hungry, thirsty, naked, and is in mortal peril. So you have to do whatever you can to get him out. So he doesn't make any compunctions. He doesn't put any parameters around it. In that particular rule and regulation, he says you got to get them out because they're in peril.
Right.
It's just not that they're uncomfortable, but you know what? They're poor, they're hungry, they're thirsty, they're naked, and God knows what else that is going on. And if you don't do this, if you turn a blind eye, Maimonides goes on to say that you have to transgress not one sin, but you've transgressed a number of different sins,
Wow.
about not releasing these captives. And he goes on, and we're not going to go, each sin. And if you do that, and you make your brother live with you, to love your fellow as your friend, to save those who are taken to death, etc., etc., etc. So Maimonides puts this at a very, 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 very high value, because, and again, his logic and his rationale is that these people in captivity are in mortal danger. That's what they are. They're literally in mortal danger, and even before they're put to death, which could happen, they're subjugated to who knows what.
Right.
Who knows
Torture.
what. So they're going to kill their soul, and they can kill their body, and they can kill their spirit. So because all of these things become a factor in how we have to say, hey, if a poor person comes to your house and says,
Right.
look, I need clothing, I know, but I'm sorry. This is priority number one.
What do you think of that, Jay? Of Maimonides?
Well, I mean, it's the thing I was thinking about is how the burden changes depending on the situation. Because if you think about, like we were talking about a couple episodes ago with your visit to Auschwitz and the other concentration camps, the Jews were obviously in no position to
be able to do that.
help their own hostages. Like it was,
Right.
because really, they were captives, certainly, if not hostages per se. But obviously, the Jews in that case, there was nothing they were going to do to free them, aside from do what Chaim Weizmann did and people like that, and just sort of hope other governments will help them, which is a very different scenario than the situation you have with Israel today, where they are capable of doing something.
Here's a question. Like in history, let's say when Maimonides is speaking, right? So most captives during those times, obviously it wasn't a political issue.
No.
Right? Because this is what we're dealing with after October 7th is kind of a new reality. What would have been a normal situation for somebody to be taken captive?
Primarily, it would be financial. I mean, you take a captive because you want money. You need money. You want money from them. Now, okay.
So be like a debtor's jail or something like that.
Debtor's jail. You want them to redeem because you want someone to come up with some kind of payment for them.
Right. Okay.
Payment for them. Now, here's the dilemma. Here's the dilemma. So till now we were talking about the great mitzvah of doing this. Okay. Now everybody knows that the Jews are going to go out there and redeem their captives. What happens?
Right.
There's an incentive here.
Right.
There's an incentive, knowing that what the community is going to do everything they can. And Rabbi Perlmutter said, quoting Maimonides, that this is the greatest mitzvah. We're going to take every available penny, to redeem a captive. Well, this is what better way to raise taxes? What do I need to raise taxes for? Just go on the street and grab a Jew and hold a Jew captive, and that'll be that and finished. Right. So there's a flip side to this.
That's the double-edged sword.
This is what it is. There's a flip side to this. See, so the Mishnah in Gittin, there's a Mishnah in the Tractate of Gittin that says captives are not redeemed for more than their actual monetary value, meaning that you make an assessment. Okay, I don't want to put any value on any different types of this, but let's say if you take the rabbi, the highest person in the community, the wisest, smartest, and you can't put a value. You can't put a value on him, but him you spend all the money. Unlike if, let's say, you take like a Hillel director, say a Hillel director, so you would estimate what's a Hillel director worth in Cal State Long Beach. $400. Okay, so $400 we'll put together quickly.
I'm not even gonna ask the value of a consultant.
No. Forget about it.
We'll pay them. We pay them.
Yeah. So probably it's true.
It's very difficult.
Right.
How do you set up a value, for different people? But you'd have to make an assessment. I mean, how much is the guy worth to us here in this town? I mean, if he's the local sofer and is writing tefillin and mezuzahs, and we have no one else, I mean, obviously his value goes up. I mean, if he's a grave digger, now we could find other grave diggers easily. Then of course his value is not
It's
as
just
not
it's
as
such
high.
a sad part of life
It
that
is.
we
It's
do-
horrible.
but it's a
It-
reality. I mean, I think
it's
it's
horrible
real,
because
but yeah,
because here you have to deal dispassionately. I mean, that's what
right.
in the beginning. You can't take this personally. It's
Well-
only like it says in The Godfather. It's only business.
Oh my God.
It's not personal. It's only business, Sonny. It's only business. Okay.
But then of course you have the situation in Israel where the payments for the hostages is going to be these vile human beings who
No,
are
so here,
Right.
so Israel is. Let's leave Israel out just for a moment.
okay.
Let's not talk
Wait,
about.
we'll get to that in a few minutes.
Because we'll get to that in a moment. We're
Okay.
talking historically.
Okay.
Okay, wait, I have a
Alright.
question.
Okay.
I have a question about historically. Were women valued differently than
Yes,
men?
women. First of all, women were put priority to get women up
Really?
before men. Of course,
Oh, okay.
of course, because it's much worse for them.
Right.
You know, a
Right.
guy could suffer, okay, but for a woman, it's much worse. So women were given higher priority to be redeemed,
Okay.
than men, for sure, without any question. But the community sometimes had to make a very, very difficult decision.
Right.
I mean, then say, listen, we cannot pay more than X amount. We will not pay
Right.
more than X amount
Right.
for them. And the reasoning that the Mishnah gives to this is that it is for the betterment of the world. Because if you keep paying exorbitant prices, it's never going to end. Ain't
Right.
over soft, And
Right.
then it goes to a different issue. What if you can help the captive escape? The Mishnah says, don't do that.
Oh.
Don't help them escape, because what happens then is that when they capture another one, they'll make it worse for the other person.
Oh.
So here also it says, for the betterment of the world, try to redeem them, but don't help them escape, because you know what? God forbid, this is a problem, and it keeps recurring to us. And if you keep making you helping them escape, think about the
It
next
could be
person.
harder.
It gets harder. It gets harder and harder and harder.
Right.
So from that Mishnah, we would say that why are we not paying the ransom? If it's exorbitant, because it's due to the financial pressure of the community.
Right.
So you don't encourage more kidnapping. So there's
Right.
two reasons. Number one is you don't want to encourage them to kidnap more, and then there's this now. If, let's say, a community member would come, which the Mishnah is going to quote, that there was this man, Levi, who redeemed his daughter for like 13,000 gold coins. Well, yeah, I mean, listen, that's
Right.
he
If he
did
was
it,
able to.
but the rabbis were not happy with him.
Oh.
No, the rabbis were not happy because, okay, you did it, but so what's going to be the next guy? The next guy, they're going to
Right.
kidnap the daughter, and he doesn't have 13,000 gold coins. So
Right.
what are we going to do? So I guess the bottom line is, I mean, at least historically, you have to allow the person, like if the family can redeem him, or if he has the money. Let's say someone kidnaps Mr. A, and A has the money, that you can do that, no matter what the price is. No matter what the price. So you can't tell someone that if they're asking $10,000 and you have $10,000 in the bank, that you can't pay that ransom. That far they're not going to go to it. It's very different. You can't compare it to Israel, where each family is not going to make a deal with
private
Hamas.
deal. Yeah.
You can't make a private deal with Hamas, because first of all, they don't have what Hamas wants. If
Right.
Hamas was only asking money, we'll give you back the captives at $100,000 a head, we would do it. I mean, there's no question, we would do it, because there's enough Jews in the world that would come up with the money to redeem these 100 people for that kind of money. So for yourself, there's no question, you can redeem yourself. What happens if it's a burden on the community? That's already a different story.
I have a question. And this goes to sort of a deeper issue of like individualism versus collectivism, right? Because if I'm a person with a family and something happens, right, and God forbid, my own family member gets kidnapped, not in today's situation, but like historically, right?
Okay.
And to me, as an individual, that's the most important thing in the entire world, right? That
Right.
my whole world is that person,
Of
but
course.
for the
Of
community,
course.
let's say, right, where if they're looking at it dispassionately, or even if they have feelings about it, because maybe it's the neighbor, maybe it's their friend,
Oh,
but
terrible.
they're looking at it collectively, right? They're looking at the broader community and what's going to happen to everyone else. What happens in Jewish law when an individual need comes up against a collective need? Do you understand my question? Like,
Oh, yes, I do. So what would happen then is we would have to establish like a little Beth Din. Each
okay.
town would have a Beth Din, and each case would come before them, and they'd have to adjudicate it.
Mhm.
Now, if this was an isolated case and said, let's pay off and goodbye, that's it. Okay, pay off and goodbye. But if you're in a situation and say where Ein Ledover Sof, I mean, we're just going to encourage this and encourage this and encourage this. I
Yeah.
mean, as hard as it is to say, we may have to say, listen, we can't pay that.
We can't do
Let's
it.
let's pray to Hashem that like ultimately he runs the world, and we'll find a way to get him out
Mhm.
without paying this. There's a very, very famous story of a mayor of Rothenburg who was a German rabbi in the 13th century. He was one of the greatest Tosafists, and and he, the Maram of Rothenburg, and during his time, kidnapping was a source of income, and he tried to run with his family, and he was caught, and they knew who he was, and they imprisoned him. The community raised an enormous amount of money, 23 or 33,000, gold coins or something like that, to give to redeem him. He refused.
Oh,
He refused to be redeemed. He said,
really?
I'm absolutely not. Unless I go free without any payment, I'm not leaving. He died in prison.
Wow.
He died.
Really?
Yep. He died
So,
because he argued that this is only going to
It's
encourage
going to hurt
people.
the right. It's
It's
going
going
to
to
hurt the
encourage them.
community.
They're going to, okay, you're going to redeem me, great.
Right.
But what about the
Right.
next person? So the next
Right.
person, you have no money to redeem them. So what? My
So
blood
they
is
don't get
redder.
it.
My blood is
Right.
redder than his blood.
Right.
So he
Right.
stayed, and he died, and they were able to years later, after many years, 7 or 10 years, to get his body. They paid off to get his body, and he's
Mhm.
buried. And he's buried. So
does
it's a hard one. It's a
d-
hard one.
does the Torah or Maimonides or anyone talk about the best way to prevent hostages from being taken in the first place?
Mm.
That's a good question. There is no. I mean, there is rules and regulations of war. I mean, if in the code of Jewish law, when you have to go to war and how you have to go to war and how you have to protect yourself. So of course, you have smart as nafshe seichem. There is a law in the Torah that you have to guard your soul and do everything you can to be protected. So you can force people in town to pay for a wall. You can force people in town to pay for a police force. You can force people in town to do this. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely, you can force people to do that. So it's called taxation, and this was done very, very often in many, many of the communities in Europe, where communal money went together to provide for the safety and the security of the community.
Mm.
But no matter what you do, there's always going to be circumstances. Now, there are rabbis in Israel today that argue that even though that in the past, we said, we should not redeem the captive because an uncertain danger is going to come. Maybe, possibly, they'll get someone else, or maybe they'll raise the price. In a case of a vaday and a suffix, if there is tangible danger to a captive,
Mm.
I mean, they're talking about in today's day and age, not
Mhm.
again the present situation. We're talking
Right.
about today a tangible danger to a captive, meaning that we know that they are going to inflict,
Pain.
at worst death or whatever. I mean, we have to do what we can to redeem them, because
Okay.
this idea of burdening and possibly in a place where there is certainty versus uncertainty, you go with certainty. That
Mhm.
some rabbis in Israel have ruled that way. So if God forbid something happens today, because kidnapping is a mode of raising funds, not only in the Middle East. I mean, in the Middle East it's done for different, but you have in Central America, South America,
Yeah.
where these
Yeah.
gangs, you pay.
Right.
Hey, whatever it's going to be, you
Yeah,
just pay them.
I forgot. Like in Mexico, it happens all the time. They kidnap
You
people,
pay.
and right.
So these are people who will argue today, certainty, uncertainty. Now, if it's just money and they're not going to do anything to him, okay, maybe you take that into consideration. But who knows with these bandits? You don't know.
So you had said earlier that it was not the right thing to help hostages escape.
Correct.
So biblically then, when Israel rescued those 4 hostages, whatever it was, 6 months ago, whenever that was,
right.
So biblically, that was the wrong thing to do.
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question. So I think let's hold off. Again, as I said before, let's hold off on the present situation.
Yeah,
it's so hard to talk about this without because we're in the midst of it.
Because I know we're in the midst of it, but
it's just not theoretical.
So very, very different.
Right.
So I'm just going to read.
Okay.
And then I'm just going to read one more piece.
Okay.
Kind of, and then we'll get into the present day situation.
Okay.
Right. So we have here 2 principles that are colliding. One is the captives' needs, and one is the community needs. So the Shulchan Aruch says like this: every moment that one delays unnecessarily the ransoming of a captive, it's as if they shed blood. Okay, so let's get that straight.
This is the code of Jewish law, by the way.
This is the code of Jewish law. If we can, we must. Okay, we must. And every moment you delay, it's murder. Okay, now, B, captives are not to be ransomed at an unreasonable cost for the safety of society. Otherwise, the enemies would exert every effort to capture victims. But a man may ransom himself at any price. So also, now here it goes into the value of people, like a great scholar should be ransomed at a greater price. Or even someone that possibly could rise to be someone special, you give, a wife is to be considered like oneself. Okay? So God forbid if your wife is, then it's yourself. Captives should not be aided to escape because, again, you have to think about the circumstances. This is not Israel here today where you have an IDF backing you. You're in a shtetl. And they're taking captives. I mean, this is a crazy government of what's going on because the enemies treat the captives with greater severity and confine them under closer custody. So here you have, again, 2 values that conflicting. One is we want to do everything we can for the captives. B, we do it under certain parameters. That's generally what we would see. Okay, now they tell stories, of course, in the Talmud that they rescued this kid, and this kid later turned out to be Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, great scholar. Okay, great, that's fine, it's wonderful. I mean, to do that. But today, let's leave history behind because I think we've already talked a little enough about the rules and regulations.
Wait,
of halacha.
Before we go to the present day, there's a story I think I sent it to you, Jay, about. It's called the. Remember that story we read? It's a short story where there's like a city and they're having some big celebration, but there's like a kid that's being held prisoner.
The ones who walk away from Omelas.
The ones who, yes. I don't know why I'm thinking about that in my head because that story, it kind of, I don't know if it's the point of the story, but it touches on this idea that like there's a kid who's being held captive, right? Who's like paying the price for everybody enjoying their life and having this grand old time while they know that this kid is suffering there, right? And eventually, they all leave. Like the people who have the morals and values, like they actually just leave, even though the kid is still there, but they can't handle the reality of like living their life knowing that this kid is suffering. It's a very interesting story.
We should do that on the book club.
We should.
That would be a good story. That's a great story. Yeah.
But I just keep thinking about that because it's so much related to people, the reality of like everyday life for people while somebody, at least one person is suffering within your midst. It's a very, anyway. Okay. Now we could talk about what's going on in Israel.
Now that we've set the parameters historically and halakhically, let's talk about some of the factors that play into here in today's day and age. So we all know that on October 7th, Hamas unleashed a terror pogrom against Israel. They sent in thousands of fighters that came in, massacred, raped, killed, decapitated, whatever you want to say, 1,200 people, plus taking 250 people hostages. The Israeli army responded by pushing Hamas back first of all, out of Israel, and then sending troops into Gaza with the intent to dismantle Hamas. That was the goal of the Israeli army. That is number one. So let's talk about four different ideas here when we talk about factors. Number one, releasing of terrorists, because Hamas sent a message that they'll do a deal, but the deal that they'll do is that they want, number one, a ceasefire and a permanent ceasefire, and number two, that they want the release of their comrades.
And we should mention that this happened previously with Gilad Shalit, because that's part of. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead. Okay. So just to do that, okay.
I'll get a different show.
Okay, what?
I'll get a different show.
Get a different show. Okay. In the year, I think it was 2012, that Israel made a deal with Hamas and released 1,027 prisoners for Gilad Shalit. I mean, he was in captivity for 6 years, 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, 5 years.
And finally, I think it was 11 or 12 that they made a deal for him. So there was already precedent that Israel is willing to exchange prisoners. They did that. Now, ironically, one of those prisoners that they allowed out was Sinwar, who became, of course, the former leader of Hamas that was, killed during this war. So there was already precedent in Israel that Israel is willing, for the right price, to make a deal. Then not only he is the most famous, but there's been other deals where we've exchanged, even for not only for live soldiers, we've exchanged for dead soldiers. We'll release. So Israel already has set a precedent that we will negotiate for the right price. Okay, now, present day situation. So number one, release of terrorists already has been a precedent. Now, what the problem is here is we have a conflict about the stated objectives of the war, because here comes Hamas, and Hamas are holding our prisoners, and they said they want, number one, a ceasefire, and number two, they want release of their comrades. So release of the comrades, okay, let's set aside, because we
whatever,
1 for 1. If they said, okay, we'll give you 1 for 1, I don't think Israel would even blink.
Yeah, they would do it.
They would do that without a question. Let's talk about the ceasefire. Now, the ceasefire came from a number of different places. Not only was Hamas agitating for a ceasefire, but the world was agitating for a ceasefire, including our president in the United States, including most of the people around the world. We're agitating for a permanent ceasefire. Let's stop the fighting. Stopping the fighting would have done what? Two things. Number one, it would have stopped our objective from dismantling Hamas. Number two, it would have endangered our troops. Because what would have happened during the ceasefire? Hamas would have already rebuilt, rearmed, regained some of its strength. So here, the government was faced with this terrible dilemma. What do we do? Here we have two objectives. Number one is dismantling Hamas. Number two is freeing the hostages. We want to free the hostages, but we can't do this. At least this is what the government position then was. We can't do this with a ceasefire, because the moment that we stop is the moment that Hamas is going to claim victory. Yes, even if we kill 10, 20,000 of them, doesn't matter. As soon as we stop with the ceasefire, until we can completely dismantle Hamas, we're not going to do that. And this is where the present situation is right now in Israel. It's a horrible place to be. It's a terrible place to be, because we have 101 hostages that are still unaccounted for. We think that maybe half of them are alive. That's at least what the Israeli government is purporting, that half of them are alive and maybe half of them are gone already. But we don't know for sure, or maybe we do know for sure and we're just not revealing it, whatever the circumstances. So it's very different. So it's very different than just paying ransom.
Paying a ransom.
And taking it, because there's a different factor in here. We're fighting a war, with them. And if you fight a war with them, I mean, I think that, you want to do whatever you can to achieve complete military victory, and then start the negotiations. There were a group of active and reserve soldiers that wrote a letter to please don't negotiate now, because that puts us puts us in danger. Because if you're going to negotiate, and just sell out, you see what happens.
Right.
You see what happens. They wrote like this, and then I'm just quoting: "We, soldiers past and present, vehemently oppose return of terrorists to their homes, which undermines years of work and raises the overall risks of soldiers being killed in the line of duty. We are very hurt by the cabinet's attitude on this matter, and the next time we soldiers are asked to stop terrorists again, we'll have to think twice if it's worth it. I mean, we're going to capture them, and then you're going to give them away. So here are soldiers that were advocating for a non-negotiation. Let's first finish the job, and then let's deal with the things."
Right.
But again, if you take the human element into it, that's why it's easy to sit here in California and say, be dispassionate. Let's take yourself out of it. You're not sitting in Israel, and you're not the prime minister, and you don't have to hear the horns and the drums outside your house and people shouting, bring home our children, bring them home. You don't have to do that. But even with that said, you have considerations that are not allowing you to make a deal with them.
It's a terrible. I don't know, Jay. What do you think? what would you do? I mean, I don't know. What would you do? But what's your thoughts on this?
I wish. I'll make a controversial statement.
Go for it.
I wish. I wish Donald Trump was president and had sent that tweet out about a year ago. Did you see his? Did you see the tweet today, Rabbi?
I saw the tweet. I was wondering. I saw this a couple of days ago already.
No, it's today.
It was today. He sent the tweet.
It was today. Yeah.
But that he's gonna at all cost. What's he gonna do? I mean,
he said he's gonna smash them at all costs.
Was this just today?
Yeah.
I had seen this like yesterday.
No, it was at like 2:00. 2:00 today.
I thought, is it real?
Yeah.
Is it him?
It is. Yeah.
Now what
he said.
I mean, why didn't everyone say that from the beginning? That's just one of the things that will forever be a stain on the Western world, is that the way he spoke about it in his tweet today wasn't the way that everyone talked about it since October 8th. Like it's just a stain on us.
I'll share it here. See if this works.
Yeah, it's. Oh yeah. Oh good. There you go. Everybody is talking about the hostages who are being held so violently and inhumanely against the will of the entire world in the Middle East, but it's all talk and no action. Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as president of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East. And for those in charge who perpetuated these atrocities against humanity, those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. Release the hostages now. I mean, you're right. Like is a language we needed.
It's a very strong statement. There's no question about it. What happens on January 20th at 12:01 p.m. when he assumes the presidency is anybody's guess.
Right.
I mean, talk is talk and action is action. Right. I mean, what is he going to do? And let's think about the possibilities. He says all hell is going to pay. Is he going to call in the American Air Force to just level out Gaza? I mean, is that what he's going to do?
No,
I don't think so.
But I think that
don't get me wrong. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I think that there's multiple. I think there's a couple things. I think number one is the tone from the existing administration has been conciliatory, at least, and they knew that that the existing administration would put as much as they could try to stall Israel in doing what they needed to do to get the hostages back,
right.
And but there's also multiple actors involved here. And so from from Trump's standpoint, you know, he can. I think what he's doing with this statement is more than putting pressure on Hamas, he's putting pressure on Iran and Qatar and these other organizations that have some responsibility for all of this. But he's putting pressure on
Turkey,
all the potential areas where pressure can be applied. And I think that, you know, this is where, you know, you could have come full circle from the question I'd asked earlier about, you know, what the Jews are in a unique situation than we've ever been in our history, where we can actually do something about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
It's not,
Right.
it's not just, we have to beg, you know, the
authorities.
The authorities or the hostage takers, right? We can actually affect change now. And so is the biblical source, considering the dramatic change of the Jewish position in the world and in the region specifically, but more generally in the world, is the biblical source still relevant?
You'd have to say it's still relevant. I mean, because, you know, the Code of Jewish Law is the Code of Jewish Law. You may just add there are significant factors that are present today that weren't taken into consideration, you know, 500 years ago, and you may look at that, but at least on the basis of what this Code of Jewish Law says, that would be the starting point. To know, now listen, number one, that hasn't changed. That our position about redeeming captives is high. I mean, we see that. I mean, you know, other countries would say, forget it.
Right.
Go to town on them. What do we care? You go to town, it's too bad. But the Jewish position has never changed. That, you know, releasing captives is a high priority. The price may have changed, because here you're not talking about guldens, and you're not talking about, you know, zlotys and, you know, rubles. You're talking about terrorists. So that changed. That's a game changer. I mean, that's not something that we had ever faced before, you know, in time. So of course there's different factors, but the general principles, I think, you know, still stay the same. And we would agree. I mean, looking back at Gilad Shalit, I mean, if you could go back and say to yourself, would I do the deal again? Would we? I don't know, right? I don't know. Knowing what we know now,
I remember the
Sinwar and
Shalit
everybody
parents.
like that.
I know, but I remember the Shalit parents sitting there every single day, right? Like crying for their son.
Yes,
And it's an
yes,
impossible situation.
Yeah, but if you knew, you know, now,
right? Obviously,
you know, now we would say to ourselves, "I'm sorry." You know,
you can't.
we would want to make an exchange.
Right.
We're willing to give up, you know, 300 people, but we're not willing to give up murderers.
Sinwar, right?
They're not willing to give up someone. Just like they want to give up this guy Bergodi. You know, the Bergodi, he's sitting over there. You know,
but Israel said no to him.
They're not giving him up. No.
Right.
They've learned already.
Right.
They're not going to give him up. So, you know, here the principles, I think, of the Code of Jewish Law remain the same. Yeah, the price here has changed. The dynamics have changed.
But also, that's why we call the Torah like a living Torah, because the principles maybe are the same, but obviously the reason we have rabbis and interpreters and scholars is because we have to take into account all the new realities. And having a country and having an army and having a government it's a new, like, they're new rules now that apply. And so we need Torah scholars to get us through this. You know?
So I think, you know, early on, I brought this up, and I want to come back to it about preventing people from taking hostages. And it was a little bit of a leading question, because you know, Rabbi, you talked about The Godfather earlier, so I'll talk about one of my favorite movies, the Untouchables. When Sean Connery is talking to Kevin Costner, and he says, they send one of yours to the hospital, you send one of theirs to the morgue. Right. Yes. And it's just the idea of making the cost so high that it's not worth it anymore.
Yes.
Right. Yes. And so to me, now when you have the means of escalating to make the costs so high that it's just not a strategy for them any longer.
Yeah.
That seems to be the only real way to to prevent that from happening. Is just make the cost so astronomically high. It's not a viable strategy.
Well, that's what happened last year.
Longer.
But that's kind of what happened last year when we got 50 hostages back in in November. Hamas was being pounded so hard and being destroyed so quickly that they couldn't breathe. So they made a deal, right? And then Israel kind of, because of international pressure and all the other things, Israel backed off, and now here we are. And I remember at the time when it happened, I don't remember who it was, but I remember somebody smart saying, we're not going to get another deal. Like, this is it. And if we don't if we don't hurt them so badly, like we're not getting another deal from them. And it's true. Look at that. It's a year later and we haven't had one more hostage exchange since the original 100 came back, or however many came back, and it's I don't know. It's so demoralizing. It's so it's a terrible thing.
Here you're dealing with a number of different other factors as well. Hamas is not a government.
Right.
It was somehow controlling, Gaza through a series of, of ways. But they're not.
Events,
It's not a government where you're sitting down and you're negotiating with them.
Yeah.
I don't even know who you're talking to right now. Right. Israel has basically eliminated many of the leadership of of Hamas. Yeah. So I don't even know. When you say make a deal with whom are you dealing with? And even if you said, okay, you know what, I'm going to go to Iran and I'm going to twist Khamenei's hand till he screams uncle. Even who's he dealing with?
Right, who's he talking to?
In Gaza today? Yeah. I mean, you could pound away and you can kill another 100,000 Gazans.
Israel offered $5 million shekel, right? 5 million shekel for every person. Not one person came forward.
Who has them?
I know.
Who has them? Does Israel know where they are? If Israel knows where they are, why aren't they after them?
Right.
So go after them if you know where they are.
I do want to say one thing that this is maybe very politically incorrect to say, but I'll just say it anyway. There's something really powerful about being on the side of being on the team that will trade your dead body, right? Your dead body for 1,000 of their live ones. Right?
You'll pay for it, right?
No, I'm saying they will trade. They'll pay. They'll pay, right, for my one dead body. Let's say I'm killed. Israel will trade my dead body,
of course,
for 1,000 of them. Like, how powerful is it to be on the side where your life is so valued?
Yeah.
I mean, what does it say for our kids and our community?
That's why we're.
I mean, if you're a Palestinian,
that's why we have this conundrum now.
Right.
Because we love life so much,
right?
And we're willing to do anything for life. And they know that,
right?
And they know that, and they take advantage of it,
right?
They take advantage of it. So, like Jay said before, that our objective needs to be that the price is so overwhelmingly high.
Yeah.
But the problem is here that we, historically, as a Jewish people, had a very, very tough time inflicting unnecessary pain on anybody else. I mean, you have to go to war. But even the wars that we fought, if you think about the 6-Day War, what we could have done after the 6-Day War is crazy. Yeah. We could have actually taken Jordan and Syria, the entire countries. Forget about just the West Bank.
Right.
We could have literally taken Jordan and Syria and incorporated that in Israel. Imagine. We were said to the Arabs, you know what? You got 7 days to get out of the West Bank. Here's buses. Get out of the West Bank, or otherwise we're leveling your towns.
It's not us.
It's not us. We immediately ran after the 6-Day War and said, no, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be willing to make a deal. We'll make a deal.
What do you mean? We gave them more. I mean, we gave them the Temple Mount. What are you talking about?
Give them the Temple Mount.
Worse deals.
And then even our strong leaders, forget about the labor. You would say, labor, the commies and all that stuff. Even our strong leaders like Begin and Sharon, who already came from the right-wing aspect of Zionism, the Likud, all these guys. Begin made the deal on Camp David, gave away the Sinai desert, and Sharon gave them Gaza. So we have this issue, that we just can't, we can't do what other nations do. We just can't come in there and just pound them for nothing. We're nice people. We want to live in
We're nice
peace and in
people.
harmony. And
Yeah.
we keep thinking to ourselves that if we just show them that we're nice, they'll be nice too. Right? If we just said to them, we'll give you a state, we'll be nice here, have a state, just love us.
Right.
And they're not going to love you. They're not going to love you. I mean, the only way the Middle
You
East.
can't force someone to love you. That's weird.
No, you can't
Thought you
force.
could.
No.
Interesting.
But like Jay said, but that's the issue. The issue is, that we don't have that kind of history where you were willing to do anything and everything to achieve our objective.
Yeah.
The Vietnamese during the Vietnam War could care less how many Vietnamese you killed.
Right.
I mean, that was not what they were worried about. They were going to bleed you to death. Every American was going to get killed. They were going to kill 10 Americans, 100 Americans, because they knew deep down inside that Americans cannot take this. They just can't. They can't take body bags coming home every day, and seeing this. And they knew that. And they were willing to sacrifice as many as it took. You lose 1 million Vietnamese, okay. But eventually we'll get the Americans out and we'll take the South. And guess what?
Yeah.
They were absolutely correct. But they did things that we in a million years would never be willing to do. Never. And
Russia is similar, probably, I mean,
it's a little Russia.
It's not the same
It's
exact,
not the
but
same.
Russia is willing to. I mean, in
Russia's
the wars
the-
that Russia's fought, they'll send
Russia
hundreds
will
of thousands of soldiers.
They don't care. They
as
will
fodder.
send thousands and tens
Yeah,
of thousands of
yeah.
troops. Yes.
In that
That's
sense,
their leadership's mindset. The leadership's mindset is, we'll do anything to defend the motherland. So if it takes 10 million of you,
right.
just know that you're going to do that. We Americans can't either. Americans also can't.
Did I ever tell you I used to a few years ago, a long time ago, longer than that, I used to work with this Russian guy, and he was like not an ugly guy, but like not like a good looking guy, but he had a beautiful wife. And so I was talking to him one day, and I said, Vlad, you're like, how did a guy like you ended up with a girl like him?
He said that. Whoa.
Yeah. This was not news to him. This was not like I was not the first person to make this observation. Trust me.
Right.
And he said,
That's a bold statement.
he said, oh well, Russian men have very high standards for women. And I said, why are your standards so much higher than everybody else's? He said, well, because all the guys are dead.
Oh my God.
But they're willing to take anybody.
Yeah. He said all the best guys were killed. So.
Oh my God.
Wow.
That's so sad.
Well, I said,
I guess in the land of the blind, a one-eyed man is king.
Exactly.
Oh
Right?
Exactly.
Wow, that is terrible.
But
That's so sad.
on a serious note, though, coming back to, I put out that very short during the holidays. I put out that very short, quote unquote, episode about that tweet that someone wrote about the difference between Israel and Israel's enemies and how they treated Sinwar's body after he was killed.
Yeah.
Where Islamists and those types of people, they drag bodies through the streets and beat them and desecrate the bodies. And Israel, treats even their worst enemies, right? I mean, I don't think Israel's ever had any enemy as evil as Sinwar in its entire history. Maybe Hitler or something like that. But I mean, since the country of Israel has existed, he's probably the worst individual enemy that Israel's ever had, and they still treated his body with respect.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's the difference between being people of the light and people of the darkness.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
And being people of the light puts you on this conundrum.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's just to bring it back to the topic at hand and the redeeming captives and hostages. Again, I keep thinking about this individual versus the collective, because for the families of the hostages, and I went to Hostage Square in Tel Aviv in March, and I met with the family of Keith Siegel, who's one of the hostage. He's an American hostage right now. Keith's mother actually passed away yesterday.
Oh.
And she did not know that her son was taken captive, by the way. Doesn't know. She was very elderly, and she must have had dementia. I'm not sure. They never told her, but she passed away yesterday. But we met with Keith's family, and I looked at their faces, and because, I was very much like, we need to win this war, and we have to fight this war like as if there are no hostages. I hate to say it like that, but I felt that way, until I went there and I looked at the family in the face, right? And I see their eyes, and they're just desperate for their family members to come home. And I see this kid this week. There was a video of Idan Alexander, who is the same age as my two sons, right in the middle of Shmuley and Mendy, and he looks like them a little bit. And I see the pictures of him. He could be their best friend. And I think to myself, how would I wake up every day? How would I breathe? How would I function? How are these people getting through life? And I just feel a deep sense of responsibility as the Jewish people that we have to the hostage families, while at the same time, which is hard to do both, but at the same time understanding that Israel has to win this war, and they have to finish off Hamas. And it's just a very, very painful reality that we're living in right now. And I don't know. I can't imagine. Maybe I'm wrong, Todd, but has there been a time where we've been in this kind of situation that the Jewish people have been so conflicted with
First of all, we're in a time where everybody knows everything.
Right.
I mean, when the mayor of Rottenburg was taken captive, the people of Baghdad didn't know about the mayor of Rottenburg.
Right.
The people of Rottenburg knew about mayor of Rottenburg.
Right.
So that changes an entire.
And they weren't seeing his picture every 5 seconds on social media.
Right.
But the anguish is a human anguish.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back to Abraham and Lot, when Abraham heard that Lot was taken captive, he was the family of the captives.
Yeah.
I mean, this was his wife's brother. Sarah was hurt. Sarah was in anguish, and she told him, get him back.
Right.
That human story, that doesn't change. It's been, and today it's a universal story because everybody knows everything, and Israel is at the center of our lives, and this has been a unique situation. It's never been anything like this. There's never been. There's been soldiers captive, 1, 2, 3, something like that, but that hasn't been a collective of 250 people taken captives by these people. And again, it's not they being taken captive by one organization. You got Hamas, and you got the others, and you got this guy, and Jihad, and Shmamad, and Babad, and all these.
I'll say one other thing before we go.
It's just.
I do want to say one other thing. I think I really, the day after October 7th, I don't know, literally within a day or two, this whole social media campaign of Bring Them Home started. And it was all grassroots, right? Because the government was totally in shambles the first few weeks after October 7th. And so it was individuals within Israel, civilians, who got together and created, this mass social media campaign. And I give them a ton of credit. It's amazing what they've done, keeping everybody aware and eye on the ball, and knowing about these hostages and making sure that the families have been supported. But the slogan, Bring Them Home, was a huge mistake, in my opinion. It was the wrong slogan. It should have been Let Them Go. Bring Them Home puts the responsibility on Israel, which it is Israel's responsibility, but the people who really bear responsibility are the Palestinians in Gaza who have them. And the fact that we've been screaming, Bring Them Home, I think has been a mistake. And I'm not the only one to say that. Obviously, I think a lot of people feel that way. But I wish we could change that and start saying, let them go, and put the responsibility where it belongs. So I don't know.
We
feel strongly about that.
2 weeks ago, we were in Auschwitz, and we saw the devastation of World War II, what it did, what the Holocaust did to the Jewish people. After the war, they interviewed Winston Churchill, who was the prime minister, from the middle of 1940 through the end of the war. And they asked him the question of why they didn't bomb the railroads to Auschwitz. This was a question that they were wondering why Americans didn't do it, why the British didn't do it. And Churchill's answer was they were singly focused on winning the war. And his idea was that the quicker we destroy Hitler, the more Jews we're going to save. So that's where we put our efforts. Let's kill the dog, kill the rat, smash him, and the faster we do this, the more Jews we're going to save. Now,
Wow.
was
That's
this an answer that was acceptable to Jews? And every Jew would say, but why couldn't you have done both at the same time? You could
right.
have killed him and did this. But that was his answer. So if you go along Churchill's rationale, the government of Israel has one objective right now. The objective right now is to destroy Hamas,
Mhm.
destroy them. And the quicker we destroy Hamas, the quicker the hostages are going to come home.
Yeah.
And if you take that position, then you don't have to struggle every day. You know
Right.
what? You hold on to them because we're coming after you. And the
Mhm.
day we're going to kill every single Hamas member, and then we'll get the hostages home.
Mhm.
Will that satisfy the family you went to see? Will
No.
that satisfy
No.
everybody? Of course not. But
No.
this is are the decisions that have to be made by
Right.
the government, and believe me, they're not easy decisions. We just say, what we can do is we know that everything is in the hands of Hashem, so we have to pray to Hashem that He releases the hostages. He has
Right.
the ability to do that.
Right. Right.
Pray to Him to release the hostages, and hopefully they come home very, very soon.
Amen. Thank
Okay,
you.
can we do next one? Can we do something on
We'll do
humor?
something.
Can
Yes.
we do
Yes.
Jewish humor?
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
Because we did
This is
Poland
heavy.
and the hostages.
I know.
I mean, what else are we gonna do now? I mean,
We'll try to
Uh,
do a fun one next
let's
time.
do
Yeah,
a
we'll
fun one next
we'll
time.
do one on Lenny Bruce or
Yeah.
There you go.
something like that.
Just a reminder that if you want to join, we are reading The Sunflower, and we're going to record an episode about The Sunflower, the book by Simon Wiesenthal, in the next couple of weeks. So if you want to get it and read it, you can, enjoy the conversation on a deeper level if you've read the book. And please, if you can, follow us, like us, share the podcast, subscribe
like
to our
us.
YouTube. Please like
Please
us.
like us.
Please.
I have such low self-esteem. I need some people to like
This
me,
is
please.
everything. This is everything for you. I know. No, you can subscribe to our
Definitely.
YouTube channel.
Please.
Yeah, seriously. You can like us on, you can what's it called? Like rate us on only 5-star. Don't rate us if it's not 5-star, but on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, it just helps people find us and helps us grow. So we really appreciate it. And follow us on Substack,
Yes.
which is
yes.
edJEWcation at substack.com. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
It's education. Yeah. At Substack
Whatever.
or whatever.
And we have we have an email, which I don't know. You could look it up. No, I'm just kidding. What's our email? Our email is educationpod at gmail.com. Yes. And if you have a topic idea or question, please write to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye, everybody.